Today, we're diving into the really personal story of a man named Justin. He was raised in a devout Christian home, but through a long, personal search for answers, he ended up finding a completely new spiritual path in Islam.
Wow, that one sentence from Justin really gets to the very heart of his entire journey. This was the core conflict that kind of set him on this quest in the first place. So let's unpack how he got to this point. His story starts in a place that might sound pretty familiar to a lot of people, a loving, really devout Christian home. For him, faith wasn't just a Sunday thing, it was woven into the very fabric of his entire childhood. Now, what's really important to understand here is that his journey of questioning didn't start because he was trying to reject his faith. It was actually the opposite. His grandmother encouraged him to read the Bible from cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation, to really, get a deep understanding of his own beliefs. But as he started reading through the Old Testament, he began to feel, pretty confused. He came across stories like the one about Lot and his daughters that he just found really morally troubling. He couldn't wrap his head around how God could command him to follow a prophet who, in his eyes, was committing major sins. So he'd go to his grandmother and ask about these verses that didn't make sense to him. Her explanation was usually, that's from before Christ came. But for Justin, that created a huge theological problem. If God is supposed to be unchanging, how could his laws and what's right and wrong just shift so dramatically? It was a contradiction that he just couldn't resolve. So all these questions were bubbling up inside him. And pretty soon, they were about to collide head-on with what he was being taught in school. When he was enrolled in a Catholic school, his confusion just got more intense. And it led to a direct confrontation over a core belief. Get this, the school dedicated the entire month of May to Mary. Every single morning, the students would recite prayers directly to her. And coming from a Protestant background where this just wasn't done, it felt fundamentally wrong to him. This daily ritual really forced him into a logical corner. He started questioning the whole distinction. Okay, wait a minute, if praying to Mary is wrong, then why is praying to Jesus considered right? For him, that line between honoring someone and actually worshiping them seemed really blurry and inconsistent. This all came to a head in one incredibly powerful moment. He's only in the 5th grade, right? The entire school is in an assembly, and it's his turn to recite a line from the prayer to Mary. He stood up, but he just remained silent. It was his first real public stand for what he believed, a quiet act of defiance that really marked a huge turning point for him. With all these unresolved questions just piling up, he eventually made a huge decision. By the time he was in his early teens, he formally left Christianity and started what would become a decade-long independent search for the truth. This timeline really gives us a clear roadmap of his journey. You can see it all laid out. After leaving Christianity around age 14 or 15, he spends about 10 years as an agnostic theist before his path eventually leads him to Islam in his late 20s. So what exactly is an agnostic theist? Well, for Justin, it meant he was absolutely convinced that a creator existed. For him, the complexity of the universe and our own bodies was proof enough. But he just didn't buy into any specific religion's version of who that creator was. After about 10 years of this, his own logic started to push him forward. He reasoned, if a creator went through all the trouble of making us, why would he just leave us here to figure everything out on our own? It just made sense that there had to be some form of communication, some kind of guide, a religion that was the correct one. And that realization kicked off a really active and systematic investigation. He decided he was going to examine the world's mainstream religions to see if he could find the one that held the truth he was looking for. And his search wasn't random at all. It was very methodical. He started with his core belief in a creator. From there, he figured a true religion must exist. So that led him to a process of elimination. He would compare the holy books of the major faiths to find the one that, in his view, was free from any contradictions. So in his analysis, here's the difference he found. He felt that other scriptures read more like stories about people, and from his perspective, they had contradictions and mistakes. But when he read the Quran, he said it felt totally different, like the direct speech of God. It felt to him like a book that was perfectly preserved and free of the kinds of errors he thought he saw elsewhere. His long search all came to a head in this very quiet, modern, and deeply personal moment. After months of intensive research, his very last question was finally answered while he was watching a YouTube video. It was 1:30 in the morning, and he was completely convinced that Islam was the truth. So, right then and there, he converted, alone in his room. But converting wasn't the finish line. It was actually the start of a whole new chapter, and it came with its own unique set of challenges and realities. He really faced struggles on a bunch of different fronts. His family didn't react well at all, and then there was the personal challenge of giving up old habits. And within the Muslim community, he felt this two-sided pressure, this internal need to be the perfect Muslim overnight, and then external criticism from what he calls the haram police, other Muslims who are maybe a little too quick to point out mistakes. But he says the absolute hardest part of his new life wasn't any of that external pressure. It was the internal one. He describes the daily struggle against his own desires and temptations as a constant, ongoing battle that requires the most discipline. And that brings us to his final, really powerful takeaway from this whole journey. It's this profound statement about personal accountability, about having the conviction to follow the truth that you find, no matter what anyone else thinks. Because as he puts it, your path is ultimately yours and yours alone.